Please recite a loud salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad wa ajil farajan. Please start another salwat. Allah. Oh, wait, one more thing. Please recite another salawat. Allahumma salli ala Muhammad.
بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين بارك خلائق اجمعين والصلاه والسلام على خير خلقه سيدنا ونبينا ومولانا ابي القاسم محمد.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى
الصلاه والسلام على اهل بيته سيدنا الطاهرين المعصومين ولعنه الله على اعدائهم من الان الى قيام يوم الدين. ولا حول ولا قوه الا بالله العلي العظيم. وأما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المتين بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم إنا آتيناك الكوثر فصل لربك وانحر إن شانئك هو الأبتر. صلى الله عليه وسلم. صلوات.
اللهم صل على محمد وعلى محمد.
Brothers and sisters, assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. So we started a discussion. During these last few days concerning the history and the development of Islam in North America. Tonight we're going to take a little break from this topic, simply because some request has been made, and I think it's important that we also go back and discuss why this topic is so important. You know, one good thing about when you give speech in public, like not on Zoom, but when the people are with you, you get to see the faces. And this can give you an energy too, right? Like, so when you're giving the speech, it can feed you. Like the speaker feeds on the energy of the crowd, right? And you can tell a lot of times if the crowd is with you or if the crowd is not with you. And so sometimes you have to take time to bring them along, right? If they're not moving at your same pace, if they're not understanding the mas'ala like you're explaining it, so you can look in someone's eye and understand that, right? And you can bring them along. In this discussion that we're having concerning the history and the development of Islam in North America, I know that maybe some people are wondering, like, why is this topic so important that we should be talking about it in Shahr Ramadan? And so tonight, in addition to the request that has been made, but also so that we can bring the crowd along, I think it's important that we reiterate and go over why this topic is so important. why it's important for those of us who might not be from America. Maybe even in our heart, we don't consider ourselves American. Why it's important for us to understand the topic, to learn from the topic. Why? Because even if, masalan, we don't feel like we're an American, our children are. So just so you can understand what I'm talking about, so you can feel my pain and understand that I feel yours too. In my house, my kids argue with my wife. They say, Baba's not an American. My children tell my wife, Baba is not an American. So my wife says, why Baba's not an American? They say, because when he eats, he sit on the floor, not at the table. And when he eat with his hands, not with fork. Huh? And these different things that we learn from Islam, right? Because we institute them in our life. So the way I act and the way I behave, and I'm not saying I'm a good Muslim. I'm just saying that some of the Islamic culture, especially from living in the East and traveling and living in Indonesia and visiting Iraq and Lebanon and living in Iran and going to these different places, it rubs off on you, right? So my kids in my house tell my wife that Baba's not an American. And she argues with them. Yes, Baba's an American. He's born here, just like we're born in the same place. Look, his passport is blue. But my kids don't see me that way. I feel an American, right? And I associate and I can identify with my people, but still my kids don't think so. Many of us might have this going on inside of us. But we have to understand that it's in our children's interest, in our grandchildren's interest, that we teach them about their history as Muslims in America. We have to make sure that this religion is understood by our children as something American. And I know, like, if I was in Iran now and I said American Islam, it'd be a problem. But one of the issues we face, as we've mentioned already, is that because of our attitudes, and I know about it because look, when the big ulama come here with the big kuluf amama, that you can hide a bache in there. You can put a midget in their amama, it's so big. The young people don't come to them. The young people don't speak to them about their issues and their problems that they're having in life. They consider that the amama and the abba and the kaba is a barrier to them. So who do they come to with their problems? That when I show up with my funny hat or my scarf and my Professor beard, and they come, they say, Noordin, I have this issue. Noordin, I have this problem. So they come to me, and I hear the complaints. I've heard of our children being told by their parents, no, you cannot spend any time with that friend because they're an American. I had an Afghani friend who was telling me this once. They were saying, like, when we were children, our parents never let us hang out with anyone outside the household. Why? Because they're an American. So these children grew up with it in their mind. And it created I don't know how you can say it in English, a kambudi, a deficiency in themselves and in their identity. And then you add into that all of the cultural issues that's going on in the country. So we don't want the children to have to choose between being an American or being a Muslim, because this is what's happening now. When the children get grown, the minute they're not under your authority anymore, they will rebel because we haven't balanced their identity. We haven't taught them that it's perfectly okay to be Pakistani or Indian and American, that it's perfectly okay to be Muslim and American. And we have not taught them that Islam is more American than Christianity. This is the truth. When I go out here, I make trouble with people. That's why I talk to everybody, because I make trouble with that. In the hotel, when they see me dressed like this, they go, oh, that's good. Now you should come and ask me a question. You have to make trouble with the people, stir the pot a little bit. One of the big issues that we have is this issue of identity that our children are struggling with. So we should pay attention. Teach our children their history, not just as Pakistanis or Indians or Iraqis, but also as Americans and as Muslims, and that Islam is as American as any other religion and more American than Christianity. In Christianity, they teach you that if you commit any sin, Jesus will pay for it, isn't it? Huh? Because Jesus died on the cross, what? It got turned off, the battery's dead. Send a salawat. Allahumma salawat. I'm going to continue, okay? In Christianity, they teach you that if you commit any sin, but you believe in Jesus, then your sin is forgiven. What is this teaching you? That somebody else is going to pay the bill. That's not what we believe as Americans. As Americans, we believe that I pay my own way. And I stand up on my own feet. This is what our culture teaches us. But Christianity teaches us that someone else will pay the bill. Islam teaches you that you are responsible for your own actions. Christianity teaches us that we are born slaves to sin. Yani there's no escape from it. From the time that you come into the dunya, you are a slave to sin. You are a sinner. It's not what America teaches. It's not what American culture teaches. American culture believes that you're born free, isn't it? What does Islam teach? That we're born free, innocent. We're not slaves. In Islam, we learn about consequences. But if you do this, there's a consequence to it. There's consequences to actions. In Christianity, you can escape all of those consequences simply by saying we believe. Really, since tomorrow night, we're going to start talking about the importation of slaves into America. And in this way, Islam was also introduced into America. Did you know more than 30% of all of the slaves brought to America were Muslims? Tomorrow night, we'll talk more about this. We have in America numerous copies of Quran that were written from memory by African slaves. Numerous books in fiqh, Islamic law, numerous books in aqidah, ideology, that were written from memory, by African Muslim slaves that were brought to America. We have a history in this country, and we should not be ashamed of it. And so it's very important during these discussions that we listen, pay attention, get some pleasure out of it, get some knowledge out of it, because even if you might not think it's useful to you, it will be useful to your children, inshallah, and to your grandchildren. Huh? Send us salawat. Let's continue. This evening, the request has been made for Isal Sawab, for our dear brother. I'm going to the text message now. Forgive me. Isal Sawab for our dear brother Shu'aib Abbas, son of the late Hassan Abbas. Please send us salawat. And Surah Al-Fatiha. Bismillah. Alhamdulillah. كنا صراط المستقيم صراط الذين أنعمت عليهم غير المغضوب عليهم ولا الضالين. Please, another salawat followed by Surah Al-Fatiha for our marhuma who we interred today at the cemetery, marhuma Azra Akbar bint Muhammad Wasi. Inshallah. Salawat. إياك نعبد وإياك نستعين اهدنا الصراط المستقيم Request was made this evening to discuss a little about Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. Because the time is short, then we said, let's spend some time tonight with Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. In this coming weekend, we will be remembering her husband, Hazrat Amir al-Mu'mineen Ali Nabi Talib alayhi salam. So it blends in well. And it's a good time to spend time talking to our sisters and inshallah strengthening our sisters and waking up our brothers, inshallah. So we'll have a very short discussion concerning this. You know, a lot of times in Islam and as Muslims, we view women as the weaker sex. And in fact, we look at women as maybe as a secondary issue. Because I don't want to be disrespectful to the sisters, right? But the way we treat our women as Muslims sometimes, and I'm not talking about anybody here, so don't get a guilty conscience. I'm talking in general. We as Muslims can treat women like a second-class citizen. And the attitudes that we have concerning women or concerning the women in our lives, our wives, our mothers, our daughters, can be tainted and sullied by this concept that some way, somehow, it entered into our psyche. If you want to know my personal opinion, I think that this is one of those things that we kept from the Jahiliyyah. Many as Muslims, we kept this from the Jahiliyyah. And maybe we've even been influenced by the Christians and Jews that have always been around us. But Islam was always a religion that was built by women. Yes, Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam was a man, and prophets are men. But his first follower was Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam. Yet to the point that decades after the death of Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam, if someone of Prophet's other wives should say anything against Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam, then Prophet would become visibly upset. And I think you know the wife I'm talking about. Prophet would become visibly upset. And he would say, you should not say anything against Khadija. She believed in me when no one believed in me. And she supported me when no one supported me. And this is the words of Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam in regards to his wife Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam. And we should recognize that quality also in our own women. Baba husbands, no one believes in you like your wife believes in you. And you have no supporters like your wife supports you. Doesn't mean she has to spend her money like Khadija spent her money. And this isn't what Prophet Muhammad meant either. Yani there is no believer in you as a husband. There is no supporter for you as a husband better than your wife. When Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam comes, when he comes and he says that heaven is under the feet of your mothers, he's not just talking about that heaven is under the feet of my mother, Susan, that heaven is under the feet of my mother for me, Susan, that I should serve her. Definitely that's one of the meanings. But what he's saying is that heaven is under the feet of the mothers. And you're not just my mother, But getting my wife also. How I treat my wife is going to determine my barzakh and also my akhirah. So I'll tell you a story. It's a real story. Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam one time was walking by the graves of the shuhada. I want to say it was one of the shuhada of the Battle of Badr, but I could be wrong. But this person was a shaheed. And as Prophet passed by the grave, and he started to make dua for this person, and he said that this person is undergoing the shikanje of the grave, yani the torture of the grave. And so the companion said, Ya Rasulullah, this person was a martyr. He's a shaheed. He's given his life in the way of Allah. You have told us that whosoever is a shaheed, fi sabilillah, then Allah widens his grave for him. And Allah opens the doors of paradise for them. وَلَا تَحْسَبَنَّ الَّذِينَ قُتِلُوا فِي سَبِيلِ اللَّهِ أَمْوَاتًا بَلْ إِحْيَاءٌ عِنْدَ رَبِّهِمْ يُرْزَقُونَ. Don't think that those people who are killed in the way of Allah, that they're dead. No, they're alive. And they receive rizq. Prophet said, yes, this is true. But bad akhlaq with your family causes torture in the grave. When Prophet comes and says, heaven is under the feet of the mothers, it doesn't just mean my mother or your mother for me or for you. Yani, the way that we treat our families can determine our barzakh and can determine if we enter paradise or not. When Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, he came and declared his message, women were at the forefront of this declaration. There's a number of reasons why Prophet Muhammad did not have a son. One of the reasons you might know about, once they asked Amir al-Mu'mineen Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, why is it that Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam did not have a son? And if he had had a son, would the Quraysh have followed his son? Imam Ali replied to them, Prophet, if he had had a son, then the people would not have followed his son, but they would have killed him. This is one answer. The other answer is that this revolution of Islam, it had to be kicked off somewhere in the society. It had to be shown somewhere in the society. And that's why I opened this khutbah with Surah Al-Kawthar. Allah says, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Inna a'tainaka al-Kawthar. Surely we've given you abundance. You know, this Arabic word Kawthar, it comes from kithrat, from something to be kathir. But when you put it on the wazn Kawthar, on this pattern of Kawthar, then it means superabundance. It implies ziyada. So it's not just kithrat, it's super kithrat. Allah comes and says, we've given you super abundance in Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. Inna a'tainaka al-kawthar fasalli li rabbika wanhar. So give praise to your Lord and sacrifice in his way. Inna shani'aka huwa al-abtar. It's your enemy who is cut off. I want you to understand what this last part means. What does it mean that the enemy is cut off? You know one meaning already. They used to tease Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam and call him abtar. Literally, the word, if you understand the origin of the word abtar, if you look it up in the dictionary today, it'll tell you that someone who has no male descendants, someone who has no one to inherit him, that this is what it means. The original meaning of the word abtar is an animal whose tail is cut. This is the original meaning of abtar. Like, you know how they do some dog breeds in America? They cut the tail, we call it bobbing the tail of the dog. They cut the tail of the dog. The original meaning of this word abtar is cutting the tail of that animal. It came to mean someone who has no successor. The Arabs used to tease Hazrat Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and call him abtar. tell him that he was cut off, that he had no male successors. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala soothes the heart of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam with this chapter of Quran, telling him, look, you have Kawthar. It's your enemy who's abtar. It's your enemy who's cut off. It's your enemy who doesn't have anyone to inherit him. Why is the enemy called abtar? Because the enemy wasn't loving their daughters. I want you to understand this. At the time of Ba'sa, it was the tradition of the Arabs of the Hijaz, and we're speaking particularly of Quraysh. They had two ways of handling daughters, or three ways. Some of them would keep their daughters and raise their daughters lovingly. Others would bury them alive in the desert, and we know about this. And another method was to abandon them at the Kaaba and hope that someone would adopt. But abandonment of the daughters was something very common in pre-Islamic society. You have to understand what a huge revolution it is that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, that his only surviving child is a daughter. I mean, this is deep. On the way here tonight, I was telling the brother, I live by signs, not by sense. Right? I look for signs. Right? And when you look at this, this is a huge sign about the character of Islam, about the revolution of Islam. That Prophet's only surviving child is a female. In a society where females are buried alive, in a society where women are abandoned and treated like property, Prophet stands up when his daughter enters the room. He puts her to sit in the most honorable position. He treats her with great respect and honor. And I want you to understand what this did to the Arab, that were the enemies of Prophet that were surrounding him. It burnt their eyes. Even one person came to Prophet once. He saw Prophet kissing Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. And the person said, you kiss your daughter? Hazrat Rasulullah said, yes, because I love her. The man said, I have this many children, and I've never kissed any of them. Prophet later said about this man, if he continues in this way, he will never smell the scent of paradise. And the fact that Hazrat Rasulullah's only surviving child is a woman, is a girl, and given that he raises this girl, educates this girl. I mean, look, I have for you tonight some of the kunya, we'll get into it in a minute. Educates this girl and raises her and gives her in marriage to the most worthy person in the community. Not following tribal law, not following tribal custom, not marrying her to the most popular or the most famous or the most wealthy or the most honored chieftain of the Quraysh or of associated clans. He gives her in marriage to the most pious. I mean, this is a huge revolution. This revolution of Islam is built on the backs of where? Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam, Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam, and Hazrat Zainab alayhi salam.
Allahumma salli ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad.
So it is a very big sign of the care and attention the Prophet gives to his only daughter, Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. Women are not a second-class citizen in Islam, even though many of us as Muslims, we've even drank the Kool-Aid and we believe that. I'm gonna make trouble for the men tonight. Many of us think that it is our wife's duty to masalan clean the house. You should know that your wife does that for you out of love. and put you in trouble tonight. Did you know, according to Islamic law, she can charge you for that? She can tell you, look, I'm cleaning the house. A normal maid gets this much money per week. Even if she gave you tahfif, even if she gave you a discount, you wouldn't be able to pay her. Okay?
They already got everything.
In your case, Agha Jasim, they got everything. But not every man is like you. And I'll make this clear because I've heard it. Not every man is like us who have a mushtarak bank account with their wife. Not every man is like us who makes sure their wife is taken care of. I've had women come to me before and say, I'm married to this man for years, and he never gives me a dime. In fact, living in his parents' house, I have to pay his parents' rent. But they've come to me with this before. One sister told me, I, from my own pocket, had to pay my in-laws $50 a week. Now, if I was the wife, I'd tell my husband, you pay the 50. I'm not paying anything. Banda Khuda goes and pays the $50. Not everybody's like us. Some of us, we really treat the women wrong, not understanding their position, looking at them as second-class citizens. And you know what's bad about it? Not just that some of the men might think that way. The most terrible thing about it is that the women have started to believe it. The ladies have started to believe it. Why do you think some of our sisters are running away from hijab? Why do you think some of the sisters are leaving the masjid or leaving the religion? Well, you can answer the question later. But part of the problem is they themselves have been convinced that they don't have any worth in the religion. When they look at hijab, they don't see effect. They don't see honor and dignity. They see dhulm and oppression. Then they're drinking the Kool-Aid too. They're getting influenced too. So we have to have a discussion about women and raise up the level of women in our communities and in our families. And the only people that can really do that isn't me, it's the husbands and the fathers. Let's discuss a little bit about Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. Salawat. You know, they talk about kunya, right? You know, kunya in English will translate it as a nickname, right? Nickname is a sign of love. I don't know if y'all know that, but nickname is a sign of love. Look at you and your relationship with your wife. Your wife might have 100 nicknames. Lovely, beautiful, girl of my dreams. Whatever nicknames you call her. I have my own, you have yours. Right? Whatever nicknames. And the more nicknames that somebody has, then the more you love them. You understand what I'm saying? And the more kunya that somebody has, the more they are beloved. Let's go over some of these nicknames of Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam. Salawat. Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam is known by many titles. The most used is the one we're using tonight, is Az-Zahra, meaning the shining one. And she's commonly referred to as Fatima Zahra. But she was also known by many other nicknames, many other kunya. Al-Batul, the chaste one, or the pure one. Because she spent so much time in prayer. She has also, and I can't list them all tonight, 125 names of veneration and love that we've recorded in the riwayat from A'imma. She's known as Abiha, and the mother of her father. This has a very deep meaning to it, showing again the position of women in Islam and in this revolution of Islam. She's known as the mother of her father. Why? Because that message of her father, the revolution of her father, is encapsulated and protected by her. So she's known as Abiha. She's known as, of course, al-Hasanain, al-Hasan, al-Hussein, and al-A'imma, the mother of the Imams. Moreover, Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, in one of these riwayat that we have from Imam al-Sadiq alayhi salatu wasalam, he says there are 9 common names for Hazrat Fatima al-Zahra alayhi salam. Fatima. You know what Fatima means? The woman who will pull her followers, her lovers, out of the hellfire. It comes from this root word, which mean. It means to throw something aside, to cast something aside, to deliver something. She's known as As-Siddiqa, the most truthful. She's known as Al-Mubarakah, that woman who's full of blessings. She's known as At-Tahira, the woman who's pure, and sinless or infallible. She's known as Az-Zakiyya, the one who is far away from any contamination. She's known as Ar-Radiyya, the woman who is very satisfied with Allah in anything that He decrees, whether it's good or bad. She is Radi, she is content. She's known as Mardiyya, the one who Allah is satisfied with, the one who Allah is content with. She's known as Muhadditha, the transmitter of ahadith. Not because you're jumping Sahih Muslim or Sahih Bukhari and you see all of these ahadith that have been transmitted by other women, so-called wives of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. It's because the ahadith of Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam were taken out by them. Do you understand the effort that was taken to hide Zahra alayhi salam? You don't believe me? Go online, find a copy of Sahih Muslim. Look at the Faza'il of Fatima Zahra alayhi salam, because it's in there. Look at the Faza'il of Hazrat Fatima Zahra. It's not even a half a page long. We just list out in this little, a speech that we put together at the last moment. We just listed out more about Fatima Zahra than they have in Sahih Bukhari. She's been hidden from us. It's not just that we don't know where her grave is, but she herself as a woman has been disguised from us. And they don't want us to see that example. They'll push forward the example of these 2 wives of Prophet. And then you wonder why some of the Muslim women are behaving the way that they're behaving. But if your example is them, what do you expect? If your role model is these 2, you should expect that you should get this behavior. Whereas if your role model is Zahra alayhi salam, then you have a different behavior. Hazrat Zahra is also known by this name, last one that's mentioned here, Al-Muhadditha and Az-Zahra. She spent her early life under the care of her mother and her father. And this is something that distinguishes the prophetic family, Ahlul Bayt alayhi salam, from the rest of the Arab, even from the childhood of Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Prophet was sent into the desert with Mother Halima to be raised, wasn't he? And he spent his early childhood there in the desert with Mother Halima to be breastfed, to be weaned, and to be brought back, isn't it? No members of Ahlul Bayt went through this. None of them were sent into the desert. None of them had a wet nurse. None of them. And you look and you see Imam Hassan or Imam Hussein alayhi salam. You look and you see any of our A'imma. You look and you see even Hazrat Zahra. They weren't sent away into the desert to be raised by someone else and to be wet nursed by someone else and then brought back. They were raised in the home. Hazrat Zahra also, she was raised in the home in the midst of Wahy and revelation. And living in the divine family with Hazrat Khadija alayhi salam as her example. Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam embodies the revolution of Islam, embodies feminine power. And I know that we had discussed this here before when we talked about feminine power. Our sisters think, our women in this culture think that their strength lays in being equal with men. We are not equals. And I know sisters don't like to hear it. Sisters, we are not equals. I'm going to say it again. Sisters, men and women are not equals, because your right hand and your left hand also are not equal. Allah says that He created us as pairs. I have a pair of hands. I have a right hand and I have a left hand. I love both of them. I can't do without either of them. I'm not willing to lose either of them. But there's some things I can do with my right that I cannot do with my left. I mean, I'm a mechanic. There's some things that I can reach with my right that I can't reach with my left. There's a reason that Allah made us in pairs. Why? So that we can be not opposites, not equals, but complementary. Yani we're supposed to be complementary. Men, you can learn a lot from your wives. They are that other half of ourselves, and they have a very high spiritual capacity. So imagine the condition of Amir al-Mu'minin Imam Ali alayhi salatu wasalam. A few days before Hazrat Zahra alayhi salam passed away, she was very ill, laying in bed. But a few days before she passed away, Ahl Bayt alayhi salam saw her get out of bed. Everybody became happy. Qissa became happy, Amir al-Mu'minin became happy. They said Zahra is getting better. They didn't know that Zahra is getting ready to travel. And in these last days, Zahra wants to fill the house with the light of Ali Muhammad. Zahra gets up from her bed and she wants to bathe her own children. All of our sisters can appreciate that. She wants to comb the hair of her own children. She wants to dress and perfume her own children. She wants to tend to the household of her husband. And everybody felt so happy that maybe Zahra's getting better. Maybe Zahra's recuperating. Maybe things are going to turn a corner now. Maybe life will get better for us. So imagine Ali ibn Abi Talib when Zahra beats her last. Imagine the sorrow of Ali when he loses his other half. Brothers, appreciate your wives, appreciate your women, appreciate your mothers. They overlook your faults and they hide things from you for your benefit. There are things that your mother doesn't tell you. There are things that your wife doesn't tell you. There are things that your wife hides from you because she loves you, not because she's trying to deceive you, but out of love for you. So when Ali is giving Zahra her ghusl and he sees the bruises on her body, he realizes how much Zahra was hiding from him. How much Zahra was pretending to be better than she actually was. How much of a strong face Zahra was putting out front so that Ali would not be hurt. That Ali should see the broken bones and bruises of Zahra. This was too much for Ali to bear. Ali alayhi salatu wasalam, after burying his wife, he goes to the grave of his master, Hazrat Rasulullah. He says, Ya Rasulullah, I have returned to you that amanah that you gave. You know, when you're given an amanat, when an amanat is given to you, the owner expects it to be returned in the condition that it was presented to you. If an amanat is given to you and you return it in a less than satisfactory condition, then you are responsible. Can you feel the guilt? Can you feel the pain in the heart of Ali ibn Abi Talib that he has to return this amanat to Hazrat Rasulullah, to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in a broken fashion? ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العلي العظيم ولعنة الله على قوم الظالمين آمين رب العالمين يا علي يا فاطمة.
اللهم صل على محمد